A struggling waitress refused a huge tip. She had no idea it would be the decision that would change her life forever. Marissa Davis wiped down the sticky diner counter for the third time that hour, her fingers raw from the harsh cleaning solution, her lower back aching from the double shift she was working. Outside, rain pounded against the windows of Eddie's all-night diner, turning the neon sign's reflection into a watery smear across the cracked parking lot. 12 hours on her feet, 3 more to go. The weight of exhaustion hung on her like a wet coat she couldn't shed. 27 years old and drowning in debt that wasn't even hers. Medical bills from her mother's cancer treatments. The unfinished community college degree she'd had to abandon. Rent on an apartment where the heat worked only when it wanted to. All of it pressing down, making each breath feel like she was inhaling something heavier than air. "Order up," called Hector from the kitchen, sliding a plate of steaming eggs and hash browns onto the pass-through counter. Marissa grabbed the plate, plastered on her customer's smile, the one that never quite reached her tired eyes, and delivered it to the old man sitting alone in booth 7. He was a regular, quiet type, always left exactly 15%, calculated to the penny. "Can I get you anything else, Mr. Jenkins?" she asked, setting down the plate. He glanced up from his newspaper, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "No thank you, Marissa. This looks just fine." The diner door chimed and Marissa turned to see a man walk in, shaking rainwater from his expensive-looking coat. Something about him seemed out of place in Eddie's, maybe the tailored suit visible beneath his open coat, or the polished leather shoes now spotted with rain. His dark hair was peppered with gray at the temples, and deep lines etched the corners of his eyes. 50-something, Marissa guessed. Wealthy, probably lost. "Sit anywhere you like," she called out, grabbing a menu from beneath the counter. The man chose a booth by the window, away from the other late-night patrons, an insomniac college student typing furiously on a laptop, 2 truckers sharing quiet conversation over coffee, and Mr. Jenkins with his eggs and newspaper. Marissa approached the newcomer's table, feeling suddenly self-conscious of her coffee-stained uniform and the frizzy brown hair escaping her ponytail. "Welcome to Eddie's. Coffee? Please," he said, his voice deep and smooth. No wedding ring, she noticed. Some habits from waitressing became automatic, noticing details, making assessments. She poured his coffee, steam rising between them like a veil. "Know what you'd like or need a minute? Just coffee for now." He wrapped his hands around the mug but didn't drink. "Actually, I have a question." Marissa braced herself. When customers started with questions rather than orders, it rarely led anywhere good. "How long have you worked here?" Tension crawled up her neck. 5 years. "Can I get you something to eat? The apple pie is fresh today." He ignored her deflection. "That's a long time at one place. You must be good at what you do." "Just doing my job, sir." She shifted her weight, pen poised over her order pad despite there being nothing to write. "The special tonight is, I'm not here for the food." He looked up at her then, his eyes a startling blue that caught her off guard. "I'm here because I've been watching you." A cold trickle of alarm ran down her spine. She took a small step back, suddenly very aware of the distance to the kitchen door where Hector stood flipping burgers. The man must have noticed her discomfort because he quickly added, "I'm sorry, that came out wrong. I've been coming here for the past week, sitting at different tables. You've waited on me 3 times, but you wouldn't remember because I made sure to be forgettable." Marissa narrowed her eyes, trying to place him. "Why would you do that?" "I like to observe people in their natural environments. It tells me more about them than any interview could." "Interview?" Her stomach clenched. "Look, if you're from the collection agency, I've already worked out a payment plan. I'm not a debt collector." He smiled, and something in the genuineness of it made her relax slightly. "My name is Daniel Harrington. I own Harrington Hotels." The name registered immediately. Harrington Hotels was a luxury chain with locations across the country. Even someone like Marissa, who could barely afford her 1-bedroom apartment, knew the name. "What does a hotel owner want with me?" she asked, suspicion still coloring her voice. "I'm looking for someone special to join my team. Someone with character." He reached into his coat pocket and removed a business card, placing it on the table between them. "I'd like to offer you a job." Marissa didn't touch the card. "I already have a job. One that pays you enough to cover your mother's medical bills?" Her breath caught. "How do you—" "I make it my business to know things about people I'm interested in hiring." He took a sip of his coffee, grimaced slightly at the bitter taste, but continued. "I'm offering you a position as assistant manager at my downtown location. Starting salary $60,000 plus benefits. Full medical coverage." The numbers crashed into Marissa like a physical force. $60,000. Medical coverage? Her mind raced through calculations. Her mother's treatments, her debt, maybe even finishing her degree. It was more money than she'd ever made, more than she'd ever hoped to make serving coffee and eggs at Eddie's. It had to be a scam. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. Why me? The question came out smaller than she intended. Daniel leaned forward. Because I've been watching how you work. How you remember Mr. Jenkins likes his coffee with exactly 1 creamer. How you slip extra bacon to the college kid who's clearly surviving on ramen. How you help the elderly woman who comes in on Thursdays count out her change without making her feel embarrassed. Marissa felt heat rise to her cheeks. She hadn't realized anyone had noticed those things. Small kindnesses matter, Daniel continued. They reveal character. And character is something I value above experience or education. Before Marissa could respond, the door chimed again. 3 young men in expensive suits entered, laughing loudly, clearly coming from a night of drinking. They settled at a table in her section, still talking over each other. I need to... She gestured toward them. Daniel nodded. Go ahead. We'll continue this conversation. Marissa approached the new customers, notepad ready. Evening, gentlemen. What can I get for you? The loudest of the 3 looked up at her, his eyes slightly unfocused. Well, hello there. His gaze traveled down her body in a way that made her skin crawl. I'll have coffee. And maybe your number, his friends snickered. Marissa had dealt with enough drunk customers to know how to handle this. Coffee coming right up. Anything else? Don't be like that, the man said, reaching out to touch her arm. Marissa stepped back smoothly, avoiding his hand. We're celebrating. My buddy here just closed a major deal. Congratulations, she said flatly. Food? After taking their orders, mostly breakfast foods to soak up the alcohol, Marissa returned to the counter to pour their coffees. She could feel Daniel watching her from his booth, and it made her movements self-conscious, stilted. When she delivered the coffees, the loud one was even more insistent. Come on, sweetheart. 1 drink with us after your shift. We've got money to burn tonight. As if to prove his point, he pulled out a money clip thick with $100 bills. No thank you, Marissa said firmly. I'll check on your food. She retreated to the kitchen where Hector gave her a concerned look. Those guys giving you trouble? Nothing I can't handle, she assured him, though her heart was racing. Between the drunk customers, Daniel's unexpected job offer, and the crushing fatigue of her double shift, she felt overwhelmed, like she might crack along the invisible fault lines running through her. When the food was ready, she carried it to their table, setting each plate down carefully. As she turned to leave, the loud one grabbed her wrist. I didn't catch your name, he said, his grip uncomfortably tight. Let go of me, please. Her voice was steady despite the anger flaring in her chest. Not until you agree to join us for a drink. Marissa was about to call for Hector when the man suddenly released her, looking past her shoulder. She turned to see Daniel standing there, his expression calm but somehow intimidating. I believe the lady asked you to let go, he said quietly. The drunk man scowled. Who the hell are you? Her father? No. Just someone who recognizes when a line has been crossed. Daniel's voice remained level. Enjoy your meal, gentlemen. Something in his tone, perhaps the absolute certainty in it, made the 3 men back down. The loud one muttered something under his breath but turned his attention to his food. Daniel guided Marissa a few steps away with a light touch on her elbow. Are you all right? Fine. Happens more than you'd think. She rubbed her wrist where the man's fingers had left red marks. Thanks for the backup, but I need to finish my shift. Of course. He returned to his booth. For the next hour, Marissa moved through the diner in a daze, refilling coffees, delivering checks, wiping down tables. The 3 drunk men continued to be loud but kept their hands to themselves. Mr. Jenkins left with his usual precise tip. The college student ordered a 3rd cup of coffee and kept typing, and Daniel Harrington sat in his booth, occasionally making notes in a small leather-bound notebook, but mostly watching her work. When the drunk men finally asked for their check, the loud one pulled out his money clip again. Here, he said, peeling off a $100 bill and placing it on top of the check, which came to $48 in change. Keep it all. Marissa looked at the 100. It would be the biggest tip she'd received in months. With it, she could buy her mother the special tea that helped with the nausea from chemo. She could maybe even pay the past due notice on her electric bill. But she knew why he was offering it. It wasn't generosity. It was the drunk, entitled belief that money could buy anything, including her dignity. I'll get your change, she said, picking up both the bill and the check. The man's face darkened. I said keep it. That's very generous, but it's too much. She kept her tone professional. What, you think you're too good for my money? He stood up, swaying slightly. Do you know who I am? Sir, please sit down. I'll be right back with your change. As she turned toward the register, she felt Daniel's eyes on her, watching this exchange with intense interest. Something about his gaze made her pause. The job offer. The way he'd been observing her. The emphasis on character. With sudden clarity, Marissa realized this might be some kind of test. But it didn't matter. Even if refusing the tip cost her the job opportunity, she wouldn't accept money offered as a power play, as a way to make her feel small. Some things were worth more than money. She returned with $52 in change. Thank you for coming to Eddie's, she said, placing it on the table. The man stared at the money, then at her, his face flushed with anger and alcohol. For a moment, Marissa thought he might cause a scene. Instead, he scooped up the bills, threw them on the floor, and stalked out with his friends trailing behind. Marissa knelt to pick up the scattered bills, her cheeks burning with humiliation. So much for dignity. A pair of polished shoes appeared in her field of vision. Daniel crouched beside her, helping gather the money. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Neither did you. He handed her the bills he'd collected. You could have taken that 100. Not worth it. Even though you need the money? Marissa stood, tucking the recovered cash into her apron pocket. Everyone needs money, Mr. Harrington. But some things cost too much. A slow smile spread across his face. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Did you set that up? The possibility that the drunk men had been actors in some elaborate test made her stomach turn. No, Daniel said quickly. I would never orchestrate something like that. But I was curious how you'd respond. He guided her back to his booth. Please, sit for a moment. She glanced at the clock. 10 minutes until her shift ended. She sat. The job offer is real, Daniel said. But I needed to be sure about you first. By watching me get harassed? By seeing if you would compromise your principles for financial gain. He looked genuinely apologetic. I'm sorry you had to deal with those men. That wasn't part of my plan. Marissa studied him, trying to decide if she believed him. There was something earnest in his expression that made her want to trust him, despite everything in her experience warning against trust. Why go to all this trouble? You could have just interviewed candidates like a normal person. Daniel chuckled. I've found traditional interviews reveal very little about a person's true nature. People tell you what they think you want to hear. But under pressure, when they don't know they're being evaluated, that's when you see who they really are. And what did you see in me? Integrity, kindness, resilience. He leaned forward. I saw someone who treats everyone with dignity, regardless of who they are or what they can do for you. Someone who works hard without complaint. Someone who deserves a break. Marissa's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. No one had really seen her in a long time. The job offer stands, Daniel continued. Assistant manager at Harrington Downtown. Training provided. Benefits start day 1, including medical that would cover your mother's treatments. It sounded too good to be true. And in Marissa's experience, things that sounded too good to be true usually were. Why me? Really? She asked. There must be people more qualified. Qualifications can be acquired. Character is inherent. Daniel slid a folder across the table that she hadn't noticed before. Everything's in here. Job description, salary details, benefits package. Take it home. Think about it. Marissa hesitated, then took the folder. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. Daniel stood, leaving several bills on the table to cover his coffee. Call the number on my card when you've decided. But don't wait too long. We need someone to start next week. He buttoned his coat, nodded goodbye, and walked out into the rain, leaving Marissa staring at the folder in her hands, her mind spinning with possibilities she'd never dared to imagine. The next morning, sunlight streamed through Marissa's apartment window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air and the folder sitting unopened on her kitchen table. She'd been too exhausted after her shift to look through it, falling into bed with her uniform still on. Now, nursing a cup of instant coffee, she stared at it like it might bite. Her phone buzzed with a text. Her mother. How was work, sweetheart? Don't forget I have chemo at 2. No need to come. Nancy from church is driving me. Marissa typed back, work fine. I'll be there. Love you. Nancy from church was a godsend, but Marissa never missed her mother's chemo sessions if she could help it. Some days it felt like those sterile hospital rooms were the only place she saw her mother anymore. Between her own work schedule and her mother's illness, quality time had become a luxury they couldn't afford. With a deep breath, she finally opened Daniel's folder. Everything he'd said was there in black and white. Assistant manager position, $60,000 annual salary, comprehensive health insurance with no waiting period for pre-existing conditions, even tuition assistance for employees seeking to further their education. It was everything she needed, everything she'd been praying for during those desperate nights when the walls of her apartment seemed to close in on her, when the pile of bills grew too high to ignore. So why was she hesitating? Maybe because good things didn't happen to people like her. Maybe because she'd learned the hard way that hope was a dangerous thing to nurture. Or maybe because, despite the 5 years she'd spent serving eggs and wiping down counters at Eddie's, despite the aching feet and endless double shifts, there was comfort in the familiar. She knew who she was at Eddie's. She knew what was expected of her. This new job, it would mean becoming someone else. Someone who wore business clothes instead of a coffee-stained uniform. Someone who gave orders instead of taking them. Someone with responsibilities beyond remembering who liked their eggs over easy and who needed extra napkins. Could she be that person? The question followed her as she showered, as she dressed in her one pair of decent jeans and a clean blouse, as she drove her ancient Honda to Ridgeview Memorial Hospital. It lingered as she navigated the now familiar corridors to the oncology department, where her mother sat in a recliner, a magazine open on her lap, an IV in her arm delivering chemicals that made her sick, even as they fought to make her well. "There's my girl," Catherine Davis said, smiling up at her daughter. At 58, she looked a decade older, her once vibrant red hair now thin and gray, her skin pallid. But her eyes, those were the same, bright, determined, loving. "How are you feeling today?" Marissa asked, kissing her mother's forehead before settling into the chair beside her. "Oh, you know, like I've been run over by a very small truck instead of a large one. Progress." Catherine patted Marissa's hand. "You look tired, sweetheart. Double shift yesterday." "Again?" "Marissa, you can't keep—" "I'm fine, Mom." Marissa cut her off gently. "Actually, something interesting happened last night." She told her mother about Daniel Harrington and his unconventional job offer, about the drunk customers and the refused tip, about the folder now sitting on her kitchen table. Catherine listened intently, her eyes growing wider. When Marissa finished, she squeezed her daughter's hand tightly. "You have to take it," she said firmly. "I don't know, Mom. It seems too perfect." "Yes, it does. And that's exactly why you should take it." Catherine's voice took on a strength that belied her fragile appearance. "Life doesn't offer many perfect opportunities, Marissa. When one comes along, you grab it with both hands. But what if it's not what it seems? What if I'm not qualified? What if I fail?" The questions tumbled out, giving voice to the fears that had kept her awake during the few hours she'd had to sleep. Catherine's expression softened. "Oh, my sweet girl. Always so careful. Always so afraid to want things." She sighed. "Do you know what I regret most about my life?" Marissa shook her head. "Not the cancer. Not even losing your father so young." A familiar sadness passed over Catherine's face at the mention of her husband, gone 12 years now. "What I regret are all the chances I didn't take. All the times I said maybe later or I'm not ready yet. And then suddenly, there's no more later. There's just now, and all those unlived possibilities." The machines monitoring Catherine's vital signs beeped softly in the background, a reminder of time's relentless passage, of mortality's constant presence. "I don't want that for you," Catherine continued. "I don't want you looking back someday with a heart full of what-ifs. Take the job, Marissa. Take a chance on yourself." Marissa felt tears prick at her eyes. "What if I'm not good enough? Then you'll learn and get better." "But I think you're selling yourself short. You've been managing that diner and all but title for years. Eddie relies on you more than he admits." It was true. When the morning cook quit without notice, Marissa had stepped in until Eddie found a replacement. When the scheduling software crashed, she'd created a paper system that still worked better than the expensive program Eddie had purchased. When suppliers increased their prices, she'd found ways to reduce waste without sacrificing quality. Maybe she did have what it took. "Besides," Catherine added with a sly smile, "this Daniel Harrington sounds interesting. Is he handsome?" "Mom." Marissa felt her cheeks warm. "He's at least 20 years older than me." "So? Your father was 15 years older than me. Age is just a number when it comes to the heart." "It's not like that. It's just a job. If you say so." Catherine's eyes twinkled with mischief. "But a man who goes to such lengths to find someone with character, that's a man worth knowing, regardless of whether romance is involved." The oncology nurse approached, checking Catherine's IV and vitals. "How are we doing, Mrs. Davis? Any nausea yet?" "Not yet, but the day is young," Catherine replied with a wry smile. While the nurse adjusted something in Catherine's IV, Marissa's phone buzzed with a text from Eddie. "Need you to come in early. Tanya called out sick. 4 p.m., okay?" Marissa stared at the text. She'd been scheduled for 6 p.m., which would have given her time to stay with her mother through the entire chemo session, to take her home and make sure she was comfortable before heading to work. Now she'd have to leave early. Again. Something shifted inside her, like tectonic plates grinding beneath the surface. 5 years of saying yes to every request, of putting her own life on hold, of barely keeping her head above water while watching her mother fight for her life. 5 years of just surviving. What had her mother just said? Life doesn't offer many perfect opportunities. When one comes along, you grab it with both hands. Before she could second-guess herself, Marissa texted back, "Can't make it early. Family emergency." It wasn't entirely a lie. Her mother's cancer was an ongoing emergency, one that had been relegated to background noise in the daily struggle to pay bills and keep going. But it deserved to be prioritized. Her mother deserved that. And maybe, just maybe, Marissa deserved something better too. "Mom," she said as the nurse moved on to the next patient, "I'm going to take the job." Catherine's face lit up with a joy Marissa hadn't seen in months. "Oh, sweetheart. That's wonderful. But I'm scared," Marissa admitted softly. "Of course you are. That's how you know it matters." Catherine reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind Marissa's ear, a gesture so familiar it made Marissa's heart ache. "But you're stronger than you think. You always have been." Marissa leaned into her mother's touch, allowing herself to believe just for a moment that everything might actually work out. "Now," Catherine said, her tone turning practical, "tell me more about this hotel job. Will you get to wear one of those smart little suits with the name tag? And employee discounts on rooms? Because I've always wanted to stay somewhere fancy." Marissa laughed, her mother's enthusiasm infectious. "I don't know about suits, but yes, there are employee discounts. We could plan a staycation once you're feeling better." "It's a date," Catherine declared, as if her recovery was a foregone conclusion, as if hope wasn't the fragile thing they both carefully nurtured between them. For the rest of the chemo session, they talked about possibilities instead of problems, about futures instead of fears. And when it was time for Marissa to leave, not for work but to prepare for her new job, she felt lighter than she had in years. The Harrington downtown hotel lobby gleamed with marble floors and crystal chandeliers, making Marissa feel painfully out of place in her best blazer, purchased secondhand, and only pair of dress pants. She clutched her purse tightly, resisting the urge to turn around and flee back to the familiar comfort of Eddie's diner. 3 days had passed since she'd called the number on Daniel's card and accepted his offer. 3 days of giving notice at Eddie's. He'd been disappointed but surprisingly understanding, of telling her mother's doctors about the new insurance. They'd been cautiously optimistic about expanded treatment options, of alternating between excitement and terror at the impending change. Now, standing in the opulent lobby, terror was winning. "Ms. Davis?" A crisp voice interrupted her panic. A woman in her 40s, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, approached with an outstretched hand. "I'm Vivian Cho, hotel manager. Welcome to Harrington downtown." Marissa shook her hand, hoping her palm wasn't too sweaty. "Thank you for having me. Daniel speaks very highly of you." Vivian's smile seemed genuine, if reserved. "He rarely gets involved in hiring personally, so you must have made quite an impression." "He caught me on a good day," Marissa said, immediately regretting the self-deprecating comment. But Vivian just laughed. "Well, we're glad he did. Let me show you around before you meet with HR to complete your paperwork." The tour was overwhelming. Luxurious guest rooms with views of the city skyline, multiple restaurants including a 5-star dining room, conference facilities, a spa, even a rooftop pool. Marissa tried to take it all in, to appear professional and composed, but inside she was screaming, "What am I doing here? I don't belong in this world. And this," Vivian said finally, opening a door on the executive floor, "will be your office." Marissa froze in the doorway. Office. She'd never had an office before. The small room had a desk with a computer, a window overlooking the city, and a nameplate that read, "Marissa Davis, Assistant Manager." "Mine?" The word came out as little more than a whisper. "All yours." Vivian smiled, seeming to understand Marissa's overwhelmed state. "I know it's a lot to take in. The first day always is. I'm sorry, Marissa struggled to find words. "Yesterday I was serving eggs and coffee. Today I have an office. It's surreal. If it helps, we all started somewhere else. Vivian leaned against the doorframe. I was a housekeeper at a motel in Nevada before Daniel gave me my first management opportunity. The revelation surprised Marissa. Vivian exuded confidence and polish. It was hard to imagine her in a housekeeper's uniform. Daniel has a knack for seeing potential in people, Vivian continued. He believes the hotel industry is about people, not just buildings and amenities. It's why Harrington Properties consistently rank highest in guest satisfaction. Before Marissa could respond, her phone buzzed in her purse. She ignored it, not wanting to appear unprofessional on her first day. You can take that if you need to, Vivian said. In fact, I'll give you a moment to settle in. HR is expecting you at 10. Just head back to the lobby and ask for Monica in Human Resources. After Vivian left, Marissa checked her phone. A text from her mother's neighbor. Ambulance took Catherine to hospital. She collapsed. I'm following in my car. Ridgeview ER. The world tilted. Marissa clutched the edge of her new desk, her vision tunneling, her heart hammering against her ribs. Number, not today. Not when things were finally turning around. She grabbed her purse and ran, barely registering the concerned looks from hotel staff as she burst through the lobby and out into the street. Her car was parked in the employee lot 3 blocks away. She ran those blocks, gasping for breath, panic making her clumsy. The drive to Ridgeview Hospital was a blur. Every red light an eternity. Every slow driver an obstacle between her and her mother. Prayers tumbled from her lips, incoherent pleas to a God she wasn't sure listened anymore. Please. Not her. Not yet. Please. The emergency room was chaos. Crying children, moaning adults, harried staff moving quickly between curtained-off sections. Marissa approached the intake desk, her voice shaking. My mother, Catherine Davis. She was brought in by ambulance. The nurse checked her computer. She's being assessed now. Are you immediate family? I'm her daughter. Her only family. Through those doors, Bay 4. The doctor will be with you shortly. Marissa rushed through the indicated doors, scanning the numbered bays until she found her mother. Catherine lay unconscious on a gurney, oxygen tubes in her nose, monitors beeping steadily around her. She looked small and fragile, her skin ashen. Mom? Marissa took her hand, shocked by how cold it felt. Mom, I'm here. A doctor appeared at her side, young and tired-looking. Are you Ms. Davis's daughter? Marissa nodded, not trusting her voice. Your mother experienced what we call neutropenic sepsis, a serious infection that's common in chemotherapy patients due to lowered white blood cell counts. We've started her on broad-spectrum antibiotics and fluids. Will she? Marissa couldn't finish the question. The doctor's expression softened. The next 24 hours are critical. But she's got good heart function, and we caught it relatively early thanks to her neighbor's quick action. Can I stay with her? Of course. We'll be moving her to the ICU shortly for closer monitoring. As the doctor left, Marissa remembered with a jolt her new job, her first day. She'd run out without telling anyone where she was going. With trembling fingers, she dialed the hotel's main number, asking to be connected to Vivian Cho. Ms. Cho speaking. Vivian, it's Marissa Davis. I'm so sorry, my mother's in the hospital. Emergency? I had to leave. Slow down. Vivian interrupted, her tone calm. Is your mother all right? They don't know yet. Infection from the chemo. I'm at Ridgeview Hospital. Don't worry about today. Family comes first. Keep us updated when you can and let us know what you need. The kindness in Vivian's voice almost undid Marissa. Thank you. I'm sorry about my first day. There will be other days. Take care of your mother. After hanging up, Marissa sank into the chair beside her mother's bed, still holding her cold hand. The adrenaline that had carried her this far began to ebb, leaving behind a hollow exhaustion. She laid her head on the edge of the bed and finally allowed herself to cry. Quiet, shuddering sobs that shook her entire body. This was supposed to be a new beginning, the start of something better. Instead, it felt like everything was crumbling around her yet again. Hours passed in the sterile limbo of the ICU. Nurses came and went. Monitors beeped. Catherine remained unconscious, her breathing shallow but steady. Marissa refused offers of food, of rest, unwilling to leave her mother's side even for a moment. As evening fell outside the windowless ICU, a soft knock on the doorframe drew Marissa's attention. Daniel Harrington stood there, looking somehow both out of place and perfectly composed in his expensive suit. Mr. Harrington? Marissa stood quickly, self-conscious about her rumpled clothes and tear-stained face. Daniel, please. He stepped into the room, his eyes taking in Catherine's still form, the medical equipment, Marissa's exhausted posture. "Vivian told me what happened. I wanted to check on you personally. That's very kind, but unnecessary. I'm sorry about today. Stop apologizing." His voice was gentle but firm. "You have nothing to be sorry for." Marissa sank back into her chair, suddenly too tired to maintain pretenses. "I thought things were finally going to get better." Daniel took the chair on the opposite side of Catherine's bed. "They still can. Setbacks don't define the journey, Marissa. They're just part of it. This feels like more than a setback." She gestured toward her unconscious mother. "The doctor says the next 24 hours are critical. What if—" She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice her deepest fear. "Then you'll face that too," Daniel said softly. "But you won't face it alone." The simple promise, from a man who was essentially still a stranger, broke something open inside Marissa. All the years of stoic independence, of carrying burdens alone because there was no one else to carry them, of being strong because weakness wasn't a luxury she could afford. It all came crashing down in that moment. "I'm so tired," she whispered, the admission feeling like surrender. "I know." Daniel's eyes held a deep understanding, as if he recognized the particular exhaustion that came from fighting too many battles for too long. "When was the last time you ate?" Marissa shrugged. "Breakfast, maybe?" "I don't remember." "That won't do." He stood, taking out his phone. "I'm ordering dinner for both of us. Any allergies or strong dislikes?" "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to." "I want to." He fixed her with a look that brooked no argument. "Allergies?" "No." She relented. "No allergies." While Daniel stepped outside to make the call, Marissa turned back to her mother, stroking her thin arm gently. "Mom? Can you hear me? I need you to fight this. Please." There was no response, just the steady beep of monitors and the mechanical whoosh of the oxygen. Daniel returned. "Food will be here in 30 minutes. Now tell me about your mother." The simple invitation opened floodgates. Marissa found herself talking about her mother's career as a high school English teacher, cut short by cancer, about how she'd raised Marissa alone after her father's death, about her wicked sense of humor and her stubborn optimism, about how she still insisted on sending care packages to Marissa's apartment, as if her daughter were away at college instead of living 15 minutes down the road. Daniel listened attentively, asking questions that revealed genuine interest rather than polite obligation. When the food arrived, a selection of gourmet sandwiches and salads far better than typical hospital fare, he insisted Marissa eat, then continued listening as she talked between bites. She hadn't realized how hungry she was, or how much she needed to talk about her mother as a person rather than a patient. By the time they finished eating, night had fallen completely, and visiting hours were technically over. A nurse appeared in the doorway. "I'm sorry, but only one visitor can stay overnight." Daniel stood. "That's my cue to leave." "Is there anything you need before I go? Anything I can bring you tomorrow?" "Tomorrow." The word struck Marissa as both a promise and a question. Would her mother see tomorrow? Would this nightmare stretch into another day? "No, thank you. You've done more than enough." Daniel hesitated, then reached into his pocket and placed a key card on the bedside table. "The Harrington is 3 blocks from here. Room 812 is yours for as long as you need it. For rest, a shower, whatever. I've instructed the staff to provide whatever you require." The kindness was so unexpected, so beyond what an employer owed a new employee, that Marissa could only stare at the key card. "Why are you doing all this?" she finally asked. Daniel's expression turned thoughtful. "Because 20 years ago I was where you are now. My wife, Elizabeth. Cancer. I spent weeks in a hospital room very much like this one." A shadow passed over his face. The hardest part wasn't the medical decisions or even watching her suffer. It was the loneliness of it, the feeling that the world was continuing outside while mine had stopped. "I'm sorry," Marissa said softly, understanding now the sadness she'd sometimes glimpsed in his eyes. "It was a long time ago." Daniel nodded toward Catherine. "Your mother is fortunate to have you, and if I can make this time even a little easier for you both, I'd like to." He left then, with a promise to check in tomorrow, leaving Marissa with a full stomach, the hotel key card, and a strange sense of having been seen, truly seen, in a way she hadn't experienced in years. Through the night, she dozed fitfully in the uncomfortable chair, waking at every change in the monitor's rhythm, every entrance of a nurse. By morning, her neck ached and her eyes burned with exhaustion, but Catherine's condition had stabilized. Her fever had dropped slightly. The antibiotics were working. Around noon, after the doctors had made their rounds with cautiously optimistic updates, Marissa finally used Daniel's keycard. The Harrington was exactly as promised, 3 blocks from the hospital, the room elegant and comfortable. She showered, changed into clothes that a thoughtful Vivian had sent over, and returned to the hospital feeling marginally more human. Days passed in this new rhythm. Catherine slowly improved, eventually regaining consciousness and even some of her characteristic humor. Marissa split her time between the hospital and brief respites at the hotel. Daniel visited daily, sometimes bringing food, sometimes just company. Vivian called with reassurances about Marissa's job, insisting she take all the time she needed. A week after Catherine's hospitalization, the doctors declared her stable enough to go home, though with additional home health support and a modified treatment plan. "I've arranged for a car to take you both to your mother's house," Daniel said when Marissa called to update him. "And there's a home health nurse scheduled to start tomorrow morning." "Daniel, that's too much. It's covered by the insurance." "Your insurance. These are your benefits, Marissa. Use them." She thought about protesting further, but found she didn't have the energy. Instead, she simply said, "Thank you." The day Catherine came home was both joyful and terrifying. Joyful to see her mother in her own space again, surrounded by familiar things rather than medical equipment. Terrifying because the close call had shaken Marissa's already fragile sense of security, reminding her how quickly everything could change. Daniel's promised car delivered them smoothly, the driver insisting on carrying Catherine's bags inside despite Marissa's protests that she could manage. The house, the modest 3-bedroom where Marissa had grown up, seemed to welcome Catherine back, sunlight streaming through windows that a neighbor had thoughtfully opened to air out the space. As Catherine settled onto the living room sofa, visibly exhausted by even the small exertion of coming home, Marissa checked her phone to find a text from Daniel. "Everything okay?" She typed back, "We're home." "She's tired but happy to be here." His response came quickly. "Excellent. Remember, the home health nurse comes at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Her name is Grace. I've also taken the liberty of having some groceries delivered. They should arrive within the hour." Marissa stared at the text, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of it. She hadn't even considered groceries. The fridge was likely empty after a week away. "What is it?" Catherine asked, noticing her daughter's expression. Daniel arranged for groceries to be delivered. Marissa shook her head in disbelief. "Who does that?" "Someone who cares," Catherine said simply. Then, with a sly smile despite her fatigue, "I told you he was worth knowing." "Mom, it's not like that." "No?" "A successful, kind man who happens to be widowed and clearly thinks very highly of you. Who visits you daily in the hospital and makes sure you have food and a place to rest. What would you call it?" Marissa felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Compassion. Kindness. Basic human decency. If you say so." Catherine's tone made it clear she believed otherwise. "When do you start work? For real this time?" The question caught Marissa off guard. With everything that had happened, her new job had become an abstract concept, something to deal with later. "I don't know. I should call Vivian tomorrow, see when they need me." "You should go back as soon as possible." Catherine's voice became serious. "You've put your life on hold for me enough, Marissa. I won't let you do it anymore." "Mom, no." Catherine sat up straighter, summoning energy from some hidden reserve. "I mean it. I have a nurse coming tomorrow. The neighbor checks in. I have my phone and my television and enough stubbornness to outlive us all. What I need is to know that you're living your life, not just surviving alongside mine." The words landed like a gentle blow, precise and painful in their accuracy. "But what if something happens again?" Marissa asked, voicing the fear that had taken root during those terrifying hours in the emergency room. "Then we'll deal with it. But we can't put life on pause waiting for the next crisis." Catherine reached for her daughter's hand. "Promise me you'll call tomorrow about going back to work." Marissa hesitated, then nodded. "I promise." Later, after Catherine had gone to bed, Marissa sat alone on the front porch swing, watching darkness settle over the quiet neighborhood. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Daniel again. Groceries arrive okay?" She typed back, "Yes, thank you." "More than we needed. Better too much than too little." "How are you holding up?" The simple question made her throat tighten. How was she holding up? She'd been so focused on Catherine, on the practical matters of medication schedules and doctor's instructions, that she hadn't really checked in with herself. "I'm okay," she wrote, then deleted it. It wasn't true, and something about Daniel's consistent kindness made her want to be honest. Scared. Relieved. Exhausted. Grateful. All of the above. His response took longer this time. All valid. The aftermath of a crisis can be harder than the crisis itself sometimes. The adrenaline fades and reality sets in. Exactly. She was surprised by how precisely he'd captured her experience. Have you thought about when you might want to come back? My mother just asked me the same question. She wants me to start as soon as possible. She sounds like a wise woman. Marissa smiled despite herself. She is stubborn too. Like mother, like daughter, I imagine. The gentle teasing surprised a laugh out of her, maybe. I promised her I'd call Vivian tomorrow. No need? Your job is waiting whenever you're ready. But there's no rush. Marissa stared at his words, marveling at the strange turn her life had taken. A month ago, she was a waitress living paycheck to paycheck, her future a narrow path of survival. Now she had a job waiting for her that could change everything, and an employer whose kindness continued to baffle her. Why did you really hire me? She typed, sending the question before she could reconsider. The response took so long that she thought perhaps he'd gone to sleep. Finally, because in a world where most people take the easy path, you consistently choose the right one, even when it costs you. That kind of integrity is rare and valuable. She read the words several times, letting them sink in. Not her experience, not her education, not even her work ethic, her character. He had seen something in her that she had trouble seeing in herself. Thank you, she wrote back, for everything. You're welcome. Get some rest, Marissa. Tomorrow is a new day, a new beginning, again. But this time she didn't face it alone. This time, there was a safety net beneath her, woven from unexpected kindness and new possibilities. As she rocked gently on the porch swing, Marissa allowed herself to feel something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. Not the desperate, clinging hope that had sustained her through years of hardship, but something steadier, more substantial. Hope grounded in reality rather than wishful thinking. Whatever came next, her mother's health, her new job, the strange connection forming between her and Daniel, she would face it with the same integrity he had recognized in her. The same strength her mother believed she possessed. The same resilience that had carried her this far. A soft breeze stirred the summer air, carrying the scent of the neighbor's jasmine. Marissa closed her eyes, breathing it in. For the first time in longer than she could remember, the future felt like a promise rather than a threat. 6 months later, Marissa stood on the rooftop terrace of the Harrington Downtown Hotel, watching the sun set over the city skyline. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the first hint of the winter to come, but she was warm in her tailored coat, a recent splurge from her first bonus. Behind her, the hotel's monthly employee appreciation event was in full swing. Laughter and conversation drifted through the open doors, a testament to the community she'd found here. In half a year, she'd gone from nervous newcomer to respected member of the management team, her natural ability to connect with both staff and guests proving even more valuable than her organizational skills. "There you are," said a familiar voice. Daniel joined her at the railing, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. He offered one to her. "Escaping your own party?" Marissa accepted the glass with a smile. "Just needed a moment? It's been a big day." Earlier that afternoon, her mother had received news that her latest scans showed no evidence of disease. Not a full remission yet, but the closest thing to good news they'd had in years. The aggressive treatment made possible by Marissa's insurance had worked better than anyone had dared to hope. "A toast," Daniel said, raising his glass. "To good news and new beginnings." "To new beginnings," Marissa echoed, clinking her glass against his. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to deep blue, the city lights beginning to twinkle below them. "Do you remember when we met?" Daniel asked eventually. "At Eddie's?" Marissa laughed. "How could I forget? I thought you were either crazy or running some elaborate scam. And now? Now I think you're still a little crazy, but in the best possible way." She turned to face him, studying the face that had become so familiar over the past months. The lines around his eyes that deepened when he smiled, the silver at his temples that caught the light. "You changed my life, you know." "No," he said firmly. "You changed your life. I just provided an opportunity. An opportunity, daily hospital visits, grocery deliveries, home health nurses." She raised an eyebrow. Daniel shrugged. "Simple human kindness. There was nothing simple about it." Marissa's voice softened. "No one had been that kind to me in a very long time." Something shifted in Daniel's expression, a vulnerability she rarely saw in the confident businessman. When Elizabeth died, I learned that there are two types of people in this world: those who back away from others' pain because it frightens them, and those who step toward it because they understand it. You're the second kind, Marissa. I recognized it the first time I saw you slip extra bacon to that broke college student. Marissa felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the champagne. Over the past months, their relationship had evolved from employer-employee to friendship, and recently, to something less easily defined, something hovering on the edge of possibility. "I have something for you," Daniel said, reaching into his coat pocket. He withdrew an envelope and handed it to her. "Consider it a 6-month work anniversary gift." Curious, Marissa opened the envelope to find 2 airline tickets to Paris and a hotel reservation at the newly opened Harrington Paris. "I can't accept this," she said, though her heart raced at the thought of Paris, a dream she'd never allowed herself to indulge. "Before you say no, hear me out." Daniel took a step closer. "The Paris property is struggling with staff training and guest satisfaction. I need someone to evaluate the service standards and help implement our philosophy there. 2 weeks, all expenses paid. A working vacation." "And the second ticket?" Daniel's confidence faltered slightly. "I thought perhaps your mother might enjoy Paris in the spring. The doctors said travel would be good for her recovery." The thoughtfulness of it, that he would think not just of her but of Catherine, made Marissa's eyes sting with sudden tears. "Unless," he added quickly, misinterpreting her emotion, "you'd prefer to take someone else. A friend or—" "No," Marissa interrupted. "Mom would love it. She gestured helplessly, unable to articulate the fullness in her heart. Daniel seemed to understand anyway. He took the envelope from her trembling fingers and placed it safely in her coat pocket. Then, with a gentleness that made her breath catch, he reached up to brush away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "Marissa," he said softly, his hand lingering against her face, "I hope you know by now that your happiness matters to me. Very much." She leaned into his touch, her uncertainty melting under the warmth in his eyes. "It matters to me too. Your happiness, I mean." His smile was slow and tender. "Then we're on the same page." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken words and growing certainty. Around them, the city continued its evening rhythm, cars honking below, music drifting from the party behind them, the distant wail of a siren. But Marissa heard only the sound of her own heartbeat, steady and strong. "Daniel?" she began, not sure what she wanted to say but feeling the need to say something. He shook his head slightly. "We have time, Marissa. No need to rush." And that was perhaps the greatest gift he had given her. Time. Time to heal, to grow, to rediscover who she was beyond survival mode. Time to dream again. "Paris in the spring sounds perfect," she said finally, a smile spreading across her face. "It does, doesn't it?" Daniel offered his arm. "Shall we rejoin the party?" "I believe they're about to announce your promotion to full manager." Marissa's eyes widened. "What? But I've only been here 6 months. 6 months in which you've transformed guest satisfaction ratings, reduced staff turnover, and implemented 3 new programs that other properties are now adopting." Daniel's pride in her accomplishments was evident. "The promotion is well earned." As they walked back toward the warmth and light of the party, Marissa thought about the strange, winding path that had led her here. From a struggling waitress refusing a tip on principle to a hotel manager about to be promoted, with Paris on the horizon and possibilities unfolding before her like flowers turning toward the sun. All because she had stayed true to who she was, even when it cost her. All because someone had seen her, really seen her, when she felt invisible. All because, in the midst of hardship, she had found the courage to reach for something better. The struggling waitress who refused a huge tip had no idea then that it wasn't just a test of character, it was the beginning of a journey back to herself, to hope, to a life beyond mere survival. A journey that was still unfolding, one day, one choice, one moment of connection at a time. And as she stepped back into the light with Daniel beside her, surrounded by people who had become like family, Marissa knew with quiet certainty that the best parts of her story were still waiting to be written.